So you talked about using primarily your bees for pitch control, and only really using your bar for when you really need to kind of catch big flops. Is there any other time you're using your bar for finer pitch control, or you're pretty much with the newer wings for only really working bees?
Yeah. So did everyone hear that? The question was how we use if there's any other way of using the bar for pitch control. Back in the day, there was a philosophy that if the glider pitches back, you push more bar to get it in front of you and the like. But that's something that's bitten me a few times now. So I only use my bar to increase angle of attack, to come off the bar to increase angle of attack. I've stopped doing if the glider goes behind, I push the bar to get it back in front of me. Because I've had a couple of very nasty collapses trying that way. If the glider does pitch back, then by all means, if you've got bee pressure, by all means put your bees up. But I recommend to not use your speed bar to try and push your angle of attack forward. So I'm only using my speed bar to increase angle of attack. At the end of a flight, I have all the pressure is in my forearms, and my forearms are tight, but I have exceptionally strong forearms, so I'm very fortunate.
On the B controls, pulling it down or pulling down and back?
B control pulling down or down and back. For me, it's all about coming straight down. You can come back, but straight down is more efficient. And I haven't noticed the difference. I haven't really played a great deal with that, but yeah, no, I'm always pulling straight down. Absolutely, because if you're pulling back, you're only pulling C's, which there's a complex relationship between the profile of the wing, your line attachment points, and where they all sit. But if we're pulling back, we're just effectively pulling the C's and not the B's. So we fragilize the wing slightly. Whereas we want to really make sure that we're inputting to keep the nose open. So concentrate on trying to input the B rather than the C. So it requires a straight down action. Yeah, so I'm not a great advocate of pulling backwards on the rises. I would generally try and come off the B's and use my brakes. Yeah, when in critical situations, when the air's turbulent and I feel like I need to be defensive, maximum defensive, I'll be on my brakes and do everything on my brakes. And if it does completely unload, I'll probably input the B just to stop anything developing into a auto rotation, a steep spiral or anything. But as soon as I've kind of got roughly control, I'll then go onto the B. Go onto my brakes and control the glider from there. Yeah. The reason why the brakes are like this on the Photon, because we worked a long time on this wing, we really wanted the wing to be able to accelerate fully without any influence on the trailing edge. And we can see that if we had, because we experimented with lots of different brake settings, and if we reduce the brakes this much, we can get it more linear, more direct. But it has an effect on the trailing edge at full speed. Because we've got a reasonably good speed range, it's like 17 centimeters on the accelerator, I believe, it's 17 or 18, I can't remember. We need that freeness in the brakes to be able to allow the trailing edge to lift up and not be affected by the brakes. Also, we centered the brakes a little bit so that when we make stall, when we're landing, when we're trying to mush the glider into small areas, we don't have the tip stalling whilst the center's still flying, because that makes gliders a little bit more difficult and more demanding to manage into a full stall. The aim was that we can just pull the brakes and the glider stalls from the center. Okay, so you can possibly get rid of a centimeter or two on the brakes, but I wouldn't go so much as like 5 cm or so. And remember, as the glider ages, we expect the brakes to shrink slightly, so that will naturally shorten, and you'll probably find that you get more dialed into it. I think the same thing that's going on with you guys flying the Photons was exactly what we had when we released the Enzo 3. Because this generation of wings, the Enzo 3, the Xeno, the Photon, have relatively long brakes, you know, especially for people who are used to flying different types of wings. And what you learn to do is, if your Cobra grip's not enough, then take more. You know, I'll take a wrap, and if my wrap is my normal position. I will release my wrap when I'm accelerating on the Bs, and I'll just hold the bottom of the handle. But once I need contact with the wing again, I'll take a wrap. And when I'm thermaling, I'll take another wrap. And then you've got the glider really in your hands like normal. It can get a bit painful on the hands, but if what you're holding is not enough for the control that you want, take more, okay? And then you'll get that contact that you want. It just takes a process of getting used to these longer brakes. And it's exactly the same story when we released the Enzo 3, because that was the first wing that we made with this style of really long brake. But it does allow the wing to accelerate freely, and it does make the glider, the way we've set the brakes, makes the glider easier to control and manage in parachute or full stall. Any questions? Bill?
So can you talk about if you're flying along, fully accelerated, and you run into a strong climb, how you ease off the bar so the glider doesn't, abruptly pitch back, it's just releasing the speed?
So Bill asked about flying into a thermal from full speed and how I ease off the bar. So my technique now is I tend to go into the thermal at full speed. I'll control anything I need to do on the Bs, and once I know I'm in the thermal, I tend to S, left and right. I don't know if that's good, it's just what I do. It feels like it increases my search. I maybe just be flying away from the cores, I don't know, but it feels like I'm increasing my search range to find and get in the core as soon as possible. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm inching off the bar. I'm not releasing the bar, because that can kind of give me false information of lift and conversion. I'm inching off, I'm inching off, I'm inching off, I'm inching off, slowly, smoothly, slowly, as I'm searching, and then hopefully I'll get into the core, by which time I'm totally off the bar. Then I'll wang the turn in, which is normally in the wrong direction. Wrong way, Russ, as I call myself. By the time I'm getting into the core. Because I'll be using the Bs to make my directional changes. And then once I go into the core, I'm off the bar, I'm off the B pressure, and I'll just go onto the brakes and take my double wrap. So it's a question, yeah, good question. It's a question about the our long brake pulleys that we use on the Photon. Again, this is a byproduct from the Enzo 3 Xeno, and that allows us to really extend the brakes so that it's not affecting the trailing edge at full speed. But what a byproduct of it is we can control the glider a little bit more depending on how we pull the brake down. If we push the brake out to our sides like this, it tends to bias the wing more towards the center. So that gives a flatter turn. So I would generally use that in the weaker lift when I really want to flatten my turn and not have too much angle. Conversely, we can come across our chest slightly, and that will influence the brake on the tip and allow the glider to roll into the turn more. When you practice full stalls, parachutal, if you want a really good clean parachutal, then you push your brake slightly to the exterior, and then that way encourages the wing to stall from the center. And when a wing stalls from the center first rather than the tips first, it's much easier to control, and it all comes as one block. So yeah. So if I hit a good core and I want it pinged and banked up and round as fast as possible, I'll haul it in towards the middle, towards my chest. Normally it's just the initiation to get the bank angle. Once you've got your bank angle, you can then just use normal inputs to maintain that.
What are you doing with your brakes when you're on the bees, when you're controlling with the bees?
So what do I do with my brakes when on the bees? I release all wraps and I just hold the bottom of the brake loop on my bee toggle. So I don't want any influence of my brakes whilst I'm flying the bees. The brakes do nothing, but obviously I want them in my hands. Any other questions?
What are your thoughts on like the being at the very top of the weight range versus like 5 kg under 50%?
So that's a weight range question. I think for flying, it depends on where you fly and what your normal flying is. When we make the wings, we do, for example, the Photon, myself and Ono, we did all the development flying. My all-up weight was just below 100, and Ono was a bit lighter than me. He's probably like 97, 98, 96, and we did all the development work on the ML size to get it flying how we want at that weight. Okay, so we're not designing, developing, setting the wing to be flown at top weight. We like to fly the wing a little bit like, for optimum performance and efficiency, you want to aim with our modern generation of wings about 5 kilos from the top. That's going to give you the best combination of sink rate and speed. 4 kilos equals 1 kilometer. And that's trim speed and top speed. So if you want more speed, like when we're flying here in strong days, the climb rates are generally pretty good. So we can accept a slightly worse sink rate and take speed. So I think in these sort of competitive environments where we may have to fly into wind as well, I think flying near the top of the weight range is good. But for normal day-to-day flying, downwind cross-country flying, 5 kilos under the top is quite nice. So remember that rule, that golden rule. It's not a golden rule, it's something that we kind of roughly worked out about 10 years ago, and we haven't really studied a great deal deeper. But 10 years ago, when we added 4 kilos, we do a lot of comparative gliding where we have exactly the same weight and we have exactly the same harness and we sit in exactly the same position and we do glides in calm air, and we calculated and we've measured that 4 kilograms, additional 4 kilograms gives you 1 kilometer of speed at trim and 1 kilometer of speed at full speed. Okay? So if you need more speed, add 4 kilos and that'll give you a kilometer an hour. Yeah, I think, I mean, we measured that on an old wing, so we think it's probably transferable to all wings. Yeah. So that's a question about winglets. So the advantage of winglets are twofold. First, they help with roll stability. We're right on the limit of roll stability, depending on our arc. So they help with roll stability at full speed. They don't stop the roll, but if we do get an oscillation, they tend to die the oscillation down much faster. So that's good for efficiency. But the main reason we implemented them on the Photon was for the EN test, the spiral dive test. Without the winglets, the wing has a natural tendency to remain neutral in spiral, which is fine for END. Like a Xeno is pretty much neutral in spiral. Neutral means that when you release the spiral dive, nothing changes, it just remains the same, and it's in a spiral dive, and it requires pilot input to exit. And if a wing requires pilot input to exit a spiral dive, then it's a END. To meet the requirements of ENC, the glider has to recover by 720 degrees or 1080 degrees, I think. So that's 4 turns. And the winglets are a black and white definite improvement in spiral stability, and were required for the nature of certification. Disadvantages is that they look stupid. But we haven't been able to measure a difference in glide. We haven't. If there is a difference, we haven't got enough resolution to measure that. It's going in the red. Okay. Yeah. So this is a question about sizes of wings and the difference between flying sizes of wings. We are constrained by physics. We're constrained by Reynolds numbers. So blame him, okay, not us. The smaller the wing, the less wing loading we have, and the more aggressive gliders are in certification. So with the extra small wings, we tend to have to often change the profile and twist the wing a little bit more so that they pass and meet the requirements for certification. So we have to castrate extra small wings normally, and you have less loading and you have less span. So the glide performance, because of all of those factors, glide performance goes down. But what we've seen and what has been measured is that where you lose out in speed and glide, you gain in climb, because you've got much better handling. You can turn the glider in much tighter circles than the big guys, and because of your wing loading, you've got a better sink rate as well. So extra small wings climb better generally, but they don't glide as well. But we do our utmost best to not to castrate them to a minimum effect. Yeah, it's a personal decision, because what a lot of the girls do in the World Cup now is they don't fly extra small, they fly the smalls, but they're carrying half their body weight plus in lead and water. And that in itself has caused a few broken and twisted ankles, you know. So it depends on how much you want performance, but to compete at top level for the national team in World Cups, then yeah, you have to fly heavier with ballast on a small rather than extra small. So that's a question about using the brakes or the beads whilst thermaling. Theoretically, using the beads, especially on the outside, should be good for performance. We see no reason why that shouldn't help performance. After fiddling around with it for the last decade, I haven't actually seen a real advantage in using the bees. It's certainly more fatiguing, more tiring. It's fine to do, and I often do it these days still, when I've got into that, I've come off the bar, I'm in a thermal, I'm searching, it's like, oh, I'm desperate, I need to climb up, and I'll just initiate the turn on the bee, and I'll do a turn or two using my bees. But within a turn or two, I'll stop that and go back on the brakes, because you've got more turn authority, so it's easier to keep the glider where you want it at the angle that you want, and you have more control. So there's no harm in practicing thermaling on the bees, or just using the brake on the inside, for example, and the bee on the outside. That's fine. But it's not going to transform anything. I don't think it makes a big difference. Is the conclusion I've come to, but again, it's something that we can't really measure. But we haven't seen a massive, I haven't seen a big enough advantage gain for it to be an effective long-term method.
Talk about the winglets a little bit. Are there any other specific design changes or improvements that have enabled kind of two-liner design to come down to an ENC rating, or any other changes?
So that's a question about design changes and coming down into ENC ratings. I think we've had the knowledge and technology. I find technology a strange word when we're talking about cloth and string, but we've had enough design knowledge to be able to put two-liners into ENC for quite some time now. What it required was a change of the law, a change of the rules, to allow collapse lines to be accepted for ENC, and that was a lot of lobbying and work to try and push that through, because we strongly believe that a good structure, a solid wing, is safer and better and easier and more efficient to fly than a wing that's collapsing all the time. But yeah, no, there has been certain challenges that we have to meet for ENC, spiral stability being a significant part of that, which is why we ended up using the winglet. The 0 is the average number. We tend to, when we have a brand new prototype, it's not normally brand new. It's normally an evolution from whatever came before. So we're taking incremental steps all the time. Occasionally, we'll go way out there and try something new. Recently, we did that with a single surface, for example. Years ago, we did it with the original two-liners. We had the HPP, high performance paraglider, which was aspect ratio 11 and two-liner with a scallop trailing edge. That was terrifying, you know. And I had a full head of hair before we started that project, I'm quite sure. And then the last one that we did something crazy was, yeah, probably the single surface. And that some of those prototypes were terrifying as well. But other than that, we're taking incremental steps. We learn from one project and we can transfer that information into another project. So, and we tend to build up carefully, safely as we can, so that we don't throw our reserves very often in the design and testing. It does happen occasionally. But we try to mitigate that by the way we practice what we do to mitigate those situations. Yeah, there's not a great deal on the cards at the moment in terms of wing development. That was a question about what do we expect to see. I think we're getting to the limits now of our line strength. Unless there's a new technology coming out that gives us the same amount of strength but with half the diameter, I don't think we're going to see a whole load of. We can't reduce lines anymore. We're already at a limit there of structural strength. In terms of profiles, I mean, there's a million profiles out there. We think we're honing in on what is about right in terms of profiles for modern paragliders, and one profile to another. The profile itself doesn't actually make a massive difference in performance. It does have an influence, but there's so many other factors that have to be put in place that it's not a limiting factor for us. We can go high camber, but the trouble with high camber is good for performance, and all the old paragliders had high camber. They needed high camber to overcome the massive amount of drag that they had, and that's why they were more aggressive in side collapse. I think we're in a nice place now where the wings are not as aggressive as they used to be in the old days, because we've increased the CM, or the reflex, in the profile, and that makes the wings with less tendency to dive aggressively in the side collapse. I think we've still got room to improve. Where we're going to see improvements, I think, in the future is with the creasing. We've got this material is very good at folding in one plane, but it's not very good at folding in two. So we've got a double curvature. We've got the billow of the sail, and we've got the curvature of the leading edge. And where we've made the creases, you know, where we've got the plastic rods, the aim of those plastic rods was really something for the stitching to follow, and it reduced the creasing in the leading edge significantly. And that gave us that little performance jump. The two lines helped, but I think it was more the technology of the plastic and reducing the creases in the leading edge that really gave us the noticeable performance gain that we've seen in the last generation of wings. But we are still, as the French beautifully say, a sac of plis, which means a bag of creases. And if you look at wings under certain lights, you know, you get a harsh light, low sun, you can see all the creases in the wing are quite significant still. So I think the gains will come from understanding and finding ways to manufacture wings with a minimum amount of creasing. And then we've got some more performance coming from there.
We're just going to transition up into this whole mentoring thing. So any questions you guys have, you will have an opportunity to ask Russ in a minute in just smaller groups.
Okay, thanks guys.
Thanks, Russ. Yeah, so obviously, you know, there's going to be a lot of questions that I'm sure you guys would like to ask Russ. You're going to have the opportunity to do that.